37. Two men are in jail this morning, including an up-and-coming Florida rapper. Both men are charged in a double murder. Police are saying the two staged a crime scene to make it look like a drive-by shooting.
No, he had murder on his mind. He had murder on his mind, or so the police say at least. It's been a while since I've seen anyone talking about YNW Melly. Melly has been locked up for over 2 years, which when you think about it, it feels like he got locked up yesterday. I wanted to go through his case once again, maybe talk about some of the updates that have came up during this time and whatnot. So yeah. Let's talk about it. Now, Melly, YNW Melly, a Florida rapper who took off back in 2018 after his song Murder on My Mind blew up. Prior to Murder on My Mind blowing up, Melly did have several other semi-big records, and he did have a little buzz going for himself, especially in Florida where he's from. Post the MOMM blow up, okay, that's just what I'm gonna call it. He dropped another pretty hot record, which was Mixed Personalities with Kanye. That's a banger. I'm sure most people are familiar with Melly already though, so let's cut to the chase and get to the real conversation. On February 13th, 2019, YNW Melly got arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The victims were Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas Jr., also known as Sack and Juvie. These were Melly's guys, his brothers, 2 people who were there during his entire come-up and blow-up, which is obviously why this became such a big moment in hip-hop. I mean, Melly does have a song titled Murder on My Mind, and now he's getting accused of actually following through with those little evil thoughts. Not only that, but are you telling me that he took out both of his best friends and staged a crime scene? That's kind of hard to believe. Prior to Melly's arrest, Miramar police conducted an investigation that brought them to the following conclusion. Melly allegedly killed both Sack and Juvie and then staged the crime scene to resemble a drive-by shooting with the help of his friend, Cortland Henry, also known as YNW Bortland. This all allegedly happened on October 26, 2018, when both Sack and Juvie were driven to the Miramar Memorial Hospital by Cortland Henry. They were driven to the hospital in a Jeep at around 4:35 a.m. They had allegedly already suffered from severe gunshot wounds when they got there and eventually were pronounced dead upon arrival. The investigators of this crime said that the ballistic test apparently showed that the whole shooting was staged because their investigation revealed that a lot of the gunshots that were fired actually came from the inside, which wasn't consistent with what Cortland reported to the police. The inconsistency in Cortland's story raised a lot of suspicion in the eyes of the detectives who were investigating this homicide, and after the police went through their investigation, forensic evidence at the end concluded that Melly pulled the trigger that ended up taking out Sack and Juvie, and that him and Cortland staged the crime scene to resemble a drive-by shooting. The prosecution also allegedly used cell phone tracking data to prove that Melly was at the scene at the time of the crime. They also claimed that Melly and Bortland drove around with the bodies in the car for a period of time so they could come up with a story about how the shooting happened when they eventually arrived at the hospital with Sack and Juvie. On top of this, a Snapchat conversation Melly had with his girlfriend at the time was recovered, and one of those messages said, "This nigga saved my life. He coming everywhere with me cause of them crackers. Come grab him, it's my fault, you forgot. I keep Bortland with me cause at the end of the day, he did one of a realest in my life." Melly ended up pleading not guilty to both counts, and Bortland did the same thing. In April 2019, the state of Florida was officially seeking the death penalty against Melly because they feel like they could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Melly took out both of his friends for financial gain. YNW Sack Chaser's family, which of course was one of the victims, his family opened up about this and said, "Death penalty is warranted in this case, then we 100% fully support it." The family's attorney doubled down on this by adding, "YNW Melly should feel the exact fear and panic he so viciously and consciously brought upon his innocent victims." In 2020, Melly ended up pushing for an emergency medical release from jail due to the Rona outbreak. However, the families of the victims were against it big time. The law firm representing YNW Sack Chaser's family said the following: "While our firm and the family of Anthony Williams sympathize with anyone affected by 19, we do not believe this justifies pre-trial release. He needs to remain in custody until a jury decides his fate." And now we're in 2021 and Melly is still behind bars. Things are very much up in the air. There hasn't been a lot of updates on this case at all. Although that is the case, I'm not surprised at all. After all, this is a homicide investigation, which they do tend to take a while to solve. Obviously, the police are presumably still very much convinced that Melly did in fact have murder on his mind, otherwise he would be at least granted some kind of bond. We did talk about the ballistic test that ended up contradicting the story and statement that was reported to them initially after Sack and Juvie were driven to the hospital. The police investigation and ballistic tests, like I said earlier in the video, showed that the gunshots gunshots came from the inside of the vehicle. Not only that, but from the left rear passenger side where Melly was allegedly sitting. Here's a picture from the actual Jeep the slaying occurred in, and as you can see right there on the left side is where Melly was allegedly sitting. YNW Bortland was the alleged driver, and Juvie was apparently sitting to the right of Melly, while Sack Chaser was on a right front passenger side. Bradford Cohen, who was representing Melly in the early stages of his case, gave his 2 cents on the case by saying, "I think there are some substantial questions and substantial areas that I think are very large holes for the prosecution that they're gonna have to fill, and I think that benefits the defense of Melly." The YNW Melly case is still ongoing. Like I stated earlier, the police seem convinced that he did the crime, and according to their investigation, the forensic evidence ended up supporting their suspicions. Melly is pointed out as the alleged triggerman in this case, which is why he's obviously not free. Whether or not he gets convicted for the crime and possibly receives the death penalty if that happens to be the case, I'm not sure, but like they say, only time will tell. But yeah, an update on the YNW Melly case. What's your thoughts on this entire Melly story? Most of us have been following it ever since Melly got arrested in February 2019. Despite all this time though, Melly still remains behind bars and have yet to beat the case. Do you think he did it or not? Definitely let me know in the comment section below, and let's have a discussion about this.